Welcome back to Lego by the Book. Last time I built set 497, the Galaxy Explorer, and today I'm going to be building set 10497, the Galaxy Explorer. This is, of course, the remake. For the 90th anniversary, they decided to remake the Galaxy Explorer as a classic space set. And I originally didn't get it, wasn't interested in it. I didn't have the Galaxy Explorer as a kid. I wasn't into classic space. I was into Blacktron and M-Tron and Space Police and Ice Planet, and because classic space was before my time. It was retired by the time I was born. So this wasn't one that I originally jumped to get, but then when I got the new Blacktron Renegade, I wanted to get this set so they would pair together, and I wanted to see how well they looked and all of that. So I went ahead and got it. So I'm going to build it, and I'm going to compare it to the old one, and then we're going to take a look at how it looks next to the new Renegade. Here we go. Well, let's take a look at what we've got here in the instructions. Classic Revisited. As part of LEGO's 90th anniversary celebration, we've chosen to revisit one of the most iconic LEGO space sets ever launched. Very cool. Oh, I was actually slightly wrong. Classic Space went all the way up to 1984, so I would have been 1 when it was retired. And then Futron came out in 87, just in time for me to be old enough to start being interested in LEGO. And they have here the whole evolution of kind of the space logo, where we had Ice Planet, which kind of had the same logo, but it was frozen, and then something in... Oh, a statue. Oh, neat. Then Benny, there was a green one, remake of the classic, an orange classic. The Space Police guy in... Kind of interesting that they're putting the Space Police guy in here, because he was Space Police rather than Futron, in my opinion. But he did have the same torso. The Futron black torso was same as the Space Police, just different helmet configuration. And then, obviously, the Galaxy Explorer re-release. Very cool. I love the stories they have. The designer. Alright. Let's build this thing. Starting with book number the first one. Oh Lord, there's a lot of Technic in here. That is interesting, because there was no Technic before, and there is just so much Technic here. That is just an inordinate number of Technic pins. What is going on here? Start with our minifig. A standard guy smiley, and a torso that's not completely faded. We'll be taking a look at that. Now, it looks like we get to build a robot. They were big on robots. They liked building robots. Interesting. Apparently the robot is delivering cups of something. Here we go. With all this Technic, there's going to be a lot of spare parts. There's what we got in bag 1. And after bag 1, oddly, I am seeing the similarity. So it started with a very flat base in the original one. It also had a very flat base, but then it was all plates. And here it's all being done in Technic, which is a lot sturdier, and there's already the beginnings of landing gear, which is pretty cool. We do have the same back trailer design, though, or back hitch, back ramp. That's there already. So, yeah, coming together nicely, interestingly. I'm digging it. On to bag number the second one. And it's definitely starting to take shape. We have most of the cockpit all gleaming white and fancy. We've got our steering wheels again. We do, in fact, have fancy landing gear. Those are pretty snazzy and fold up real smooth. And we do have our thruster engines, a little not as pronounced on the old. You'll see how they were on the previous one. But it didn't have retracting landing gear to worry about, so it didn't have to be quite so svelte. Need to remember to stay over this way a little bit more. Stay in frame. All right, bag number the 3rd. Another pilot. So far we've got a red one and a white one, which is in keeping with the original. All right, let's build this thing. Color palette for this spaceship uses only colors that were available in the 1979 when the original product was released, except for the color 194 medium stone gray. So yeah, all of the gray is new light gray. But everything else they're using blues and yellows, and they're keeping that, which is nice, I suppose. Spare parts. And there are some build techniques being used to create these angles that I ain't never seen before. They are really kind of ingenious, and I may have to try to remember them for future ship builds, big ship builds of my own, because the way they're able to connect things at angles and then cover it it's kind of genius. I'm impressed. I dig it. On to bag number the 4th. Red and green navigational lights on the original model were not placed traditionally. Red lights on the right side, green lights on the... Instead, the red lights were forward and the green lights were towards the rear. The new model keeps the same placement. Fair enough. Things have changed in the future, apparently. Things will do that. Spare parts. And now it's really starting to come together. The top is still a mess of colors because Lego does that thing where any part that you can't see, they will do in a different color when they can. But look at the underside. Oh, it's looking svelte. Look at it. Look. There's some neat little stuff snuck in that I think is really cool. Even though in some cases you probably won't be able to see it particularly well, but I'm looking forward to seeing how it all comes together. All right, bag number 5. Our second red space guy smiley. Now we build some nifty stuff. Spare parts. And now we truly have the great flat wing that is the Galaxy Explorer. I was kind of expecting it to have more definition underneath than the original. But no, it is a slab, just like the original was, and that is really, really cool. It's a lot bigger, as we'll see when we compare the two. All right, let's get into this. Fascinating. The astronaut beds are designed so they can lie down without taking their air tanks off. Oh, neat! I've got beds. That's definitely a step up in amenities. Spare parts. We got more of the interior. We've got more of the wings. We have the landing ramp. And that's actually pretty groovy. I have some questions about how that's all ultimately going to play out, but I'm looking forward to seeing how it all comes together. Fascinating. Bag 7! The final Space Guy Smiley. The pilot of the original set used a single steering column to control the craft. This update version also has upgraded controls. 2 steering columns. Also, the panels that they're using are fascinating. This one's very reminiscent of a classic control panel, and this one's similar. But that one, if I'm not mistaken, that's an M-Tron Blacktron 2 control panel. So I don't know what that's doing there other than looking cool. Yep. There's a whole bunch more panels. I'm wondering where they're all going to go. The original Galaxy Explorer bore the designator LL928 printed on a 1x4 brick. In the modern version of the ship, the LL928 is printed on a 50% larger brick in the 1x6. Fascinating. Well, that kind of settles that. On the little radar screen is a Blacktron logo, an original Blacktron logo. So, yeah. I'm justified in this whole operation. And there we have the main fuselage cockpit area built. We've got room for our 4 pilots. We've got controls, diagnostic panels. Then back here we've got science stations and beds and here's the part that baffles that I'm genuinely surprised by. They actually have an airlock for the cargo bay area, so you can enter it, close it, and then open it up. And then close it, and then go back in. That's an unnecessary detail, and I think they did a really cool job of implementing it. That is just neat. Very, very cool. Slightly worried about there. Looks like there's a slight crack in the seal here. It's not quite closed up. They could have raised that a brick. Maybe I will myself, but let's get on to bag number the 8th. Walkie-talkie and wrench were the original tools used by the astronauts in the original set. And there we have the back end done. And they've done some really clever stuff. So the thrusters are now brick built rather than being that old. When I was a kid, I always thought it was a megaphone for some reason. Couldn't understand why they kept putting megaphones on ships. And then when I saw Apollo 13, it all made sense. And then, yeah, this pops open as it did before. This comes down, ramp comes out. I'm not sure what this is about. I assume that's going to hold the rover in place in some manner. Airlock. Yeah. Pretty snazzy. There is, as I suspected, just a hint of a gap. You can barely see it, and it would take a 1x1 plate, one of which is in as a bonus part so far. If you really wanted to fix it. Though I think a 1x3 would look better to fix that gap, but I'm not bothered. Alright. Looks like we're building the engines. Oh. Spare parts. Here we go. Final bag. Spare part. All right. We have our rover. Let's put ein Dude on rover. It zooms nicely. It's very rovery. Now we can put our landing gear down. Very smooth. Open up the back. Okay, so we can just barely get under there. And then, yeah, that holds it in place. Much nicer than in the previous version. There was really nothing holding the rover in place. Now, it deploys! Let's back him in there so we can drive out. Roverage. That is pretty snazzy. There's just so much more play feature in this one than the original. Just like the interior, the fact that there's more than 2 control panels and a single steering wheel. We have just copious amounts of, there's beds, there's science stations, there's windows, there's tools, there's levers, there's gears, there's seats for everybody in the main cockpit. Where are we supposed to put the robot, do you suppose? Apparently, back in the day, the classic space dudes had a system for which uniforms meant what. So the uniform colors mattered. Certain colors were engineers, certain colors were pilots, rover drivers, scientists. Because there were 4 colors, I believe. No, 5 colors? Red, blue, white, yellow, black. So I think there were 5 colors originally. I didn't make any distinction. That wasn't my level of nerd. All right. What do we got? Okay, I think that... Oh, still need to figure out where I'm putting the robot. There wasn't a robot in the original set. Tore his face off. We'll put him back here in the back area to make more coffee. There it is. It's big. It's svelte. There's a neat thing where there's a little bit of a gap here, but they added the black, yellow, and the black and yellow, like they have the stripes up here, so it disguises it beautifully. All of that stuff on the underside, there's only a few parts showing. There's some odd pins sticking out there. I don't know why that would be, unless I was supposed to push those in and never did. Let me check. Does sound like the sort of thing I might do. No, definitely not. Definitely not. I wonder why those are extra long. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Svelte undercarriage. I like that. The landing gear goes down smooth. Makes for a fully flat. They kept the essence of the original ship with that big flat wing. Having the retractable landing gear is just a neat feature. Still has the thrusters. So, all right, time to bring out the original one. Let me clean up this mess. All right, so here we have the original as best as I could build it with the parts I had available. And you'll notice one thing, it's much, much smaller. But it has that very flat wing design. It had much bigger thrusters and non-retracting landing gear. It did still have, the back opens up, there's a loading ramp, there's a little rover. We can actually compare rovers. We can compare loading ramp systems. This one is far, far fancier. Rover's mashugana. Obviously a very similar design, just a little bit more. They don't have gray air tanks anymore. They've got a headlight. But other than that, very similar in concept. Apparently he's got a thruster. This one has little clips that actually clip to hold this together. This had to be held together with a little plate you just put there. No interior beyond what was right, just that steering wheel in the front. As far as the back area, there was nothing really back there. The rover just kind of went in there. But the rover could also sit out here, and you could have spacemen in there doing stuff, but there's no airlock like there is on the new one, so that's a huge improvement in general design, in my opinion. The fact that it has this airlock door, I dig that. That's good design thinking. The way the ramp retracts, goes up, slides in, that's pretty neat, and then the door comes up. Yeah, that's just neat. Obviously, everything about it is more complex, but they have the same profile. If you look, close this one back up. Ooh. Close, you wretch. They kept that profile, which is an odd profile. I mean, you'd think they would go with something a little bit more voluminous, a little bit more voluptuous. No, it's still flat as a pancake on the bottom and then built up on the back, and I like it. They stuck to the classic design. They've got the stripes, they've got the logo, they've got the double kind of canopy, big long canopy look, the fins, the spoiler, the thrusters on the side, the big engines here. The pointy bits on the front are much more pronounced, but the pointy bits on the side are the exact same part. Just a really well done remake, homage, in my opinion. I think they did well. Good work on them. Let's put this rover back. So now the question is, who did it better, the Galaxy Explorer or the Blacktron Renegade? So I'm going to pull up the Renegades, and we can take a look at them real quick. And then we'll compare before and afters. Now, to be fair, I have done some modifications. So, like many people, I did agree that there was a lot more yellow on the remake than there was on the original, and that was more of a departure than I want. I wasn't going to complain about it. I was just going to acquire the parts if I didn't have it and make it more so. I do need to add some hoses. That's one thing they didn't put in, was the hoses, and that's because I don't think they make them anymore. But here we have the original and the remake of the Blacktron set. And it's also larger, but it has the same, again, a very similar profile. Dual engines, kind of dual fuselages, long cockpit, short section. Oh, this one's supposed to have a rover. This one's rover locks in and then can then just drop, which is neat. This one's rover is in a pod that can be removed, and then it's got a tiny little rover. The differences in rovers is definitely more significant with the Blacktron set, as here is you've got this whole pickup truck looking space thing, and you don't have a pod. I have already designed additional pods that can lock into there. Here's my take on a pod that's meant to be more like this pod. I'll do a video on all of this, of course. But yeah, now it's got a pod like the original instead of a dropping chip thing. Anyway, not the point. Back to focus. Focus, sir. So the question is, which one did they do more faithfully? And I think it's going to come down to a matter of opinion. Adding a lot more yellow, they definitely departed from the original color scheme a little bit more. There was just a whole lot more yellow on here, as opposed to it just being the little bit of accents, and I kind of reduced it to as much to match the original as I could, whereas these two, they're just They're just 1-to-1. They didn't add any more blue. They didn't add any more gray. They just, which, to be fair, it was, to be fair, some more. It was a less monochromatic design in the first place. This is very, very black, but it's Blacktron, so, I mean, it makes sense. Anyway, who did a better job on the upgrade? So if we look at the originals, this one had some play features. It did have little rover craft that could come off, which was neat. It did have a Land Rover that could go in there. It was very modular, so you could take the engines off, you could take this center pod out, you could take these front segments off, and you could recombine them, so you could put the engines here and make a ship. You could connect, I've made some modifications to the system. You could connect these together and just have a satellite-looking thing blast off. You could rearrange the order on all of the pods. You could put the pod on the outside. You could put the pod over here. Put the cockpit on this side. You could do all kinds of things. It was very modular. Now, it was originally mono-directional, meaning engines could only be engines, cockpits could only be cockpits. And I have changed that so that now anything can go in any direction. And that does make it more complicated. Point is, it had that neat modularity. That was the big thing about Blacktron, is that all of the sets had that modularity in common, and you could take parts from, say, this set and combine it with this set and most of the other sets, and they weren't perfect. It wasn't as standardized as it could have been, but it was fairly good. The new one has that same modularity. The cockpit comes off. Again, I've changed the connection points so that they're backwards compatible. But all the same parts came off. The engines came off, the cockpit came off, but you didn't have the midsection anymore to be able to make, a ship a little bit more similar to this by having a cockpit, a pod, and an engine. Didn't have that anymore. This came as a gift with purchase, was an upgrade of this ship, and oddly, they were not cross-compatible. It was very, very easy to make them cross-compatible, and I've, again, made it so that it's backwards compatible with the old stuff, just because I'm that kind of a nerd, but it did have the same modularity. It actually had in some ways it had less, because it didn't have a central pod that you connect to, but they were omnidirectional, so you could put the cockpit on the back and just reverse the whole ship if you wanted to. So you could put the engines on this end. And put the cockpit on that end and basically pull your whole ship inside out, which you couldn't do with the original, and you really still can't, even though I've made because these aren't the same distance apart, whereas this one it is. So there were some differences. The neck is not different lengths. So here the two were different lengths. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. These two were different lengths. On this one, they were the same. There weren't a whole lot more play features, other than the ability to drop that center pod. It does have retractable landing gear. And I am entirely rambling at this point, but I don't care. It did still have the little wing cruisers. So the Blacktron symbols are actually little ships that come off and can fly around, just like this one had little ships that could come off. So it had most of the same features, but didn't really have too much new. The rover was a lot more robust, and the whole dropping of the rover thing, it came with a robot that the original one didn't come with a robot. So all in all, I think it was a fairly decent representation upgrade. But there wasn't a whole lot more. Whereas the Galaxy Explorer, I feel, has a lot more. And I say this as a lifelong and unyielding fan of Blacktron. I really think they did a better job building a more interesting ship with this one. The fact that it's got the full cockpit that all four can sit in with better controls and some retro controls. The fact that it's got beds and control stations. The fact that they added landing gear. Well, the Blacktron one had that too, so both of them have that. The back hatch with a much better designed deployment. The airlock. All in all, I definitely feel that this one has a lot more going for it. I still aesthetically prefer the Blacktron ship, but I think they did just a gorgeous job. The build techniques in this, that was, I think, the other thing that really impressed me, is the way they did all of this, getting these angles and making everything cover and line up, but still having the same profile somehow feels somewhat magical. Having it all get covered up, but still having that same feel, because all of this is still just regular brick. They didn't try to get super fancy using tiling or plating or no. This is all still brick. The way it opens up in the back, that looks the same. They didn't try to make that any more svelte or anything. No, it still just looks like the thing hinging open in the back. They were able to stay true to the original design, but included so many fascinating build techniques. The way the engines here attach, the whole superstructure of the main frame. It's not just plates stacked on top of each other, which they could have done, but they didn't in order to get the smooth edge along it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful build. And again, the fact that the profile is just bigger, but exactly the same. I'm genuinely impressed with the build on this one. The Renegade it doesn't have anywhere near as many complicated build techniques. It's a fairly straightforward build, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a very solid build. It's a very beautiful build. But there wasn't anything in it that had me going, that's really cool. Other than the way the clamping mechanism, I thought that was clever. But there wasn't anything in it where going, I need to remember that build technique. I may need that later in life. So, yeah, I love it. I'm glad it happened. This was my childhood coming back through. This was the childhood coming back through of some friends of mine who I stream with on Old Gray Bricks. Every Monday on Zoom is the channel. Me and a bunch of other old guys. But I'm the young one. They were all classic space kids. So they're a little bit older than me, and this was their joy when this came out. And I understood, and I didn't understand at the time because I didn't have classic space, but then when this one came out, I understood how they felt about this one. And I'm really glad that they got such a beautiful build, because it just is stellar. Honestly, I don't know how they thought about it. I'm pretty sure they loved it. I know they all bought it. It was a day one buy for all of them, the same way the Blacktron one was an absolute day one build for me. But yeah, the things that were brick built. Oh, one thing I don't think I mentioned, the arrow on the back. So this had a brick with a little arrow on it. The arrow is brick built in an absolutely brilliant design. It's not something I don't think I would have ever thought of, the way they ended up creating that arrow on the outside. Just neat. So yeah, little stuff like that. Brilliant work all around. I have no idea where I'm going to put it, but I also have no idea where I'm going to put this. There's definitely no room in the original, where I originally had the classic stuff, and I wouldn't want to put them with the classic stuff anyway, because they ain't classic. But I will need to find somewhere to display them, because they are awesome. I definitely think they go well together. That was the other real question, I suppose, was how well do the remakes go together? And I think they go nicely. The scale is appropriate. They're both scaled up. This one is obviously all mean and black and dark and sinister, and this one is Guy Smileys. Though, I mean, the Blacktron guys were Guy Smiley under the helmet, but you couldn't tell. They had the visor on. But similar style, similar upgrading in parts in many ways. There were a lot of new parts were used in here, a lot of snot techniques used to make it all svelte the same way they did here. Not quite to the same extent, in my opinion. I don't think they went quite as far with this one. I keep saying that like I'm not happy with it. I absolutely love what they did. But I am more impressed with this one as far as build technique and overall design. So, yeah. Love that they have the Blacktron symbol on that little radar going, yeah, no, they're connected. Absolutely, we're doing that. I also like that they have the status symbol. I want to say, was it this one? Yeah. In this set, they have this on the reticle. So this set also included the Galaxy Explorer on its targeting computer. This one did not, I don't think. Doesn't look like it. So that's another little neat Easter egg that was, because I think this one came out first. I think this was the first one that came out as a brick, and then this one, maybe? I'd have to actually double check that. It wouldn't surprise me if it's actually the other way around. This one came out first, and then they released this, and so they had the Easter egg that they were going to bring Blacktron with the radar, and then this one having the, no, they go together. Even though, chronologically, the Galaxy Explorer well predated Blacktron, but that's the beauty of retroactive continuity. We can just change things. All right, I have definitely blathered far too much. If anyone is still watching, thank you for watching. Let me know if there's any sets you really think I should acquire. I have my backlog of sets I need to build is ridiculous. I recently reorganized my Lego room and was baffled by how many sets, even big sets, I have that still need to be built. So, yeah. I'm gonna go get some food. I'm hungry. Thank you for watching.